Welcome back to Void of Fears. Before we jump into today's story, I've got to ask for a quick favour. If you could smash that like button, drop a comment below, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. It seriously makes a huge difference. YouTube's algorithm loves that stuff, and it pushes my videos to new viewers who might dig these stories too. I really appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to do that. It means the world to me and helps keep this channel growing. Alright, enough of me rambling. Let's dive into today's story. Beyond the visible side of the moon, something truly ancient lies hidden. A 1970s mission, long forgotten by history, accidentally uncovered not just structures but an undeniable presence. Decades of NASA silence have only fueled the whispers. Today, we break that silence and expose the terrifying truth of the moon, city, and what still whispers from its depths. My name is Dr. Theodore Walsh. I'm 81 years old, and for 56 years I've carried a weight that slowly crushed the life out of me. I was NASA's communications director during the Apollo program, stationed at Mission Control in Houston during humanity's greatest adventure. What I'm about to tell you will sound insane. I've made peace with that. After today, I don't expect to wake up tomorrow morning. They've let me live this long because I stayed quiet, because I understood the implicit threat, because I valued my life more than the truth. Now that I'm talking, well, I'm an old man anyway. My heart's failing, my lungs are shot, and what's left for them to take, except a few more painful months. It started on Christmas Eve 1968, but not the way the history books tell it. The whole world watched Apollo 8 orbit the moon. 300 million people gathered around televisions to see Frank Borman, James Lovell, and William Anders become the first humans to leave Earth's gravitational embrace. They became instant heroes, reading from the book of Genesis while floating in the cosmic dark, photographing Earth rising over the lunar horizon like a blue jewel in an ocean of black. Beautiful, transcendent, a moment of unity during one of the most turbulent years in American history. That's what everyone remembers. That's what they were supposed to remember. But I was in Houston, sitting at monitoring Station 7 in a corner of Mission Control that nobody else was watching, wearing headphones connected to a secondary communications channel that most people didn't even know existed. This was a backup system, a failsafe for technical diagnostics, and I heard what they weren't supposed to say. When Apollo 8 passed behind the moon, all communication with Earth cut out completely. This was expected, a natural consequence of having a massive celestial body blocking radio signals. For 48 minutes, those three men were more alone than any humans had ever been, floating in silence over an alien landscape, while the entire planet held its breath waiting for them to emerge. Our recording systems never stopped though, capturing every word on the spacecraft's internal channel, every breath, every whisper. That's how I heard William Anders' voice at exactly 9:47 p.m. Houston time, tight with something between awe and terror, saying words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Frank, I'm seeing something down there. In Tsiolkovsky. It's not natural. Jim, are you seeing this?" There was a pause, maybe 3 seconds, filled with the hiss of static and the sound of breathing. Frank Borman, mission commander, always the commander, shut it down immediately. His voice carried the weight of military discipline and something else, something that sounded like fear he was desperately trying to control. "Bill, stay on mission. We'll discuss after we're dark." I sat there in that corner of Mission Control, headphones pressed against my ears, and felt my understanding of reality shift. I pulled up the trajectory data on my console. At that exact moment, Apollo 8 was passing directly over Tsiolkovsky crater, a 100-mile wide impact scar on the lunar far side with a central peak rising over 10,000 feet above the crater floor. It was one of the most distinctive features on that hemisphere, easily recognizable in the photographs that Soviet probes had captured years earlier. And Anders, a trained observer, a man selected for this mission precisely because of his attention to detail, had seen something there that scared him badly enough to break protocol mid-mission. I made a copy of that recording. I wasn't supposed to. Hell, I wasn't even supposed to be monitoring that channel during Farside passes. But something in Anders' voice made me act. I dubbed it to a spare tape, labelled it with a fake timestamp, and buried it in my personal files. That decision probably saved my life and definitely cost others theirs. When Apollo 8 splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on December 27th, the celebrations were instantaneous and massive. Ticker tape parades were already being planned. Time magazine covers were printed. President Johnson was preparing speeches. These men had achieved something that seemed impossible just a year earlier, and America needed heroes. We were hemorrhaging in Vietnam, our cities were burning with riots, Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy had been assassinated, and we desperately needed something to believe in. But before any of that celebration, before they could even call their wives from the recovery ship, the crew was taken directly to a sealed conference room at the Johnson Space Center. I was there because I was the one who'd flagged the transmission. So was a senior Air Force officer whose name I was explicitly instructed never to speak, never to write, never to even think about in conjunction with what I'm about to describe. 2 other men in suits stood by the door, saying nothing, their faces blank as marble. The officer sat down across from the 3 astronauts and asked Anders one question. His voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it more frightening. "Colonel Anders, tell me exactly what you saw over Tsiolkovsky Crater." Anders looked at Borman, then at Lovell, then back at the officer. His hands were shaking slightly, though his voice remained steady. He was still wearing his flight suit, still smelled like the spacecraft. That particular combination of sweat and recycled air and fear. "Structures, sir. Geometric. Precise. Not natural formations. There were doorways carved into the crater wall at multiple points. I saw at least 7 distinct openings, all of them rectangular, all of them identical in size. And I saw pathways, constructed pathways leading from the crater floor up to those entrances." The officer nodded slowly. "Did you photograph them?" "Yes, sir. High-resolution shots on the Hasselblad. They're in the film canisters we brought back. Those photographs are classified as of this moment. This conversation is classified. What you saw is classified at the highest possible level. Gentlemen, I need you to understand something." He leaned forward, his eyes moving from one astronaut to the next. "America is tearing itself apart right now. We have protests in every major city. We have young men dying in rice paddies on the other side of the world. We have a population that's lost faith in government, in authority, in the future itself. You 3 just gave them hope. You reminded them what we're capable of when we work together. That's what America needs right now. Not mysteries, not questions that we can't answer, not implications that would fundamentally alter our understanding of human history and our place in the universe. We need heroes, clear, simple, inspiring heroes. Can you be that for your country?" All 3 men nodded, but I watched Anders' face. He looked like a man who'd glimpsed something beyond human comprehension and was being told to pretend it was just another crater, just more grey rock, nothing to see here. Frank Borman spoke up, his commander's instinct to protect his crew overriding everything else. "Sir, with respect, what exactly are we talking about here? What do you think those structures are?" The officer stood up. "That's not your concern, Commander. Your concern is completing your debriefing, attending the celebrations, giving your speeches, and living your lives as the heroes you are. The structures in Tsiolkovsky Crater are now a matter of national security. They will be investigated by appropriate personnel, through appropriate channels. You've done your part, let others do theirs. That should have been the end of it. 3 astronauts see something strange, report it, get classified, move on. But over the next 4 years, every Apollo crew that orbited the moon saw those structures. Every single one. Apollo 10 in May 1969, with Tom Stafford, John Young, and Eugene Cernan. Apollo 11 in July, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins. Apollo 12, 14, 15, 16, 17. 8 missions. 24 men who orbited the moon. All of them passed over Tsiolkovsky. All of them saw what was carved into those crater walls. And all of them were given the same speech with minor variations about national security and the importance of being heroes. Most of them stayed quiet. Most of them understood the message. They had families, careers, futures. They'd signed secrecy agreements that could put them in federal prison for violations. They knew people were watching them, monitoring their communications, making sure they didn't talk to journalists or write unauthorized memoirs, or drink too much at parties and start telling stories they shouldn't tell. But Harrison Schmitt couldn't accept it. Schmitt was fundamentally different from every other astronaut in the program. He wasn't a fighter pilot or a test jockey who'd come up through the military. He was a geologist with a doctorate from Harvard, a professional scientist who'd spent years studying the moon's composition and geological history from Earth. He'd been selected for the astronaut program specifically to bring scientific expertise to lunar exploration, and he was the only professional researcher ever to walk on the moon's surface. Before Apollo 17 launched in December 1972, Schmitt spent 18 months fighting NASA administrators to change the mission's landing site. He wanted to go to Tsiolkovsky crater on the far side. He had detailed proposals prepared, communication satellites planned that could relay signals from the far side back to Earth, geological surveys outlining the scientific value of sampling the crater's central peak and analysing those structures up close. He presented his case in formal briefings, in informal conversations, in memos that grew increasingly frustrated as rejection followed rejection. I attended 3 of those briefings. Schmitt was brilliant, passionate, convincing. He explained how landing in Tsiolkovsky could answer fundamental questions about lunar formation, about the moon's geological history, about the composition of the far side which differed dramatically from the near side. He showed trajectory analyses proving it was technically feasible. He had backup plans and contingency procedures. Everything was thought through, professional, scientifically sound. NASA rejected him every time. Too expensive, they said. Too risky. The communication satellite alone would cost millions. The landing approach would be more complex. The crew would be completely out of contact with Earth during critical phases. What if something went wrong? What if the lunar module malfunctioned? What if they needed immediate assistance from mission control? But I knew the real reason, and so did Schmitt. They couldn't let him land there because he'd document everything with scientific rigor. He'd collect samples from those structures. He'd photograph them from ground level. He'd analyze the materials, date them, determine their origin. He'd bring back irrefutable proof of something that was supposed to remain a classified whisper, buried in sealed files, known only to a handful of people with clearance levels that didn't officially exist. I ran into Schmitt one night about 2 months before Apollo 17's launch. It was late, past 11, and I was walking through the mostly empty cafeteria at Johnson Space Center, heading home after a long day of meetings. He was sitting alone at a corner table, drinking terrible vending machine coffee and staring at lunar maps spread across the surface. When he saw me, something in his expression shifted. Recognition, calculation, then decision. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Ted, sit down for a minute." I should have kept walking. I should have made an excuse. But I sat down. He leaned forward and lowered his voice until I had to strain to hear him. "Ted, I've seen the Apollo 8 photographs. The real ones, not the sanitized versions they released to the press. I have a colleague who owes me favors, and he showed me what's really in the classified archive. We both know what's in Tsiolkovsky. This could be the most important discovery in human history, and we're just pretending it doesn't exist. We're sending men to the moon to collect rocks, while there's evidence of construction, of intelligent design, of something that shouldn't be there, and we're ignoring it. I chose my words very carefully, aware that this conversation could end my career or worse. Jack, some things are too big for individuals, too big for careers, too big for what we think we know about the universe. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw frustration and desperation, and something that looked like grief. I became an astronaut, to expand human knowledge, to push boundaries, to find answers to questions we've been asking since we first looked up at the stars, not to bury the most profound discovery we've ever made, because it's inconvenient, or frightening, or politically complicated. I know, I said quietly, but that's not the world we live in. That's not how this works. He looked down at his maps, at Tsiolkovsky crater marked in red, at the approach vectors he'd calculated, at all the work that would never be implemented. Then what's the point? What's the point of any of this if we're just going to lie about what we find? I didn't have an answer for him. I still don't. 3 days before Apollo 17 launched, something unusual happened. A camera package was quietly added to the spacecraft manifest, listed under a generic equipment code that wouldn't attract attention. High resolution, far-side targeting, specifically calibrated for low-light conditions and long-distance photography. It wasn't on any official documentation, it wasn't discussed in briefings, but it was loaded onto the command module, and Schmidt knew exactly what it was for. During Apollo 17's mission, while Commander Gene Cernan flew the command module in lunar orbit and Schmidt prepared for their descent to Taurus Littoral Valley, Schmidt spent hours photographing the far side. Official targets, yes, potential landing sites for future missions, geological features of interest. But he also pointed that special camera at Tsiolkovsky crater during multiple orbital passes, using different angles, different light conditions, capturing every detail he could. I kept copies of those photographs. They were supposed to be classified immediately upon the crew's return, buried in archives that required presidential authorization to access. But I had clearance, I had access, and I had a document lab that could duplicate film without leaving traces, so I copied them before they disappeared, and I've kept them hidden for 50 years. I've enhanced them with modern software, digital technology that didn't exist in 1972, and what they show is undeniable. Geometric formations along the crater walls, perfect rectangles carved into solid rock, openings that are clearly entrances, not natural caves or lava tubes, pathways connecting the crater floor to those entrances, smooth and regular, ascending the steep slopes in switchback patterns that suggest deliberate engineering, and in a few frames, captured during optimal lighting, you can see details inside some of those openings. Corridors extending into darkness, surfaces that reflect light in ways that lunar rock shouldn't. Someone built those, someone with tools and planning and purpose, and they built them large enough for humans to enter. After Apollo 17 returned in December 1972, NASA held a press conference announcing the successful conclusion of the Apollo program. Budget constraints, they explained. The program had achieved its goals. We'd proven we could reach the moon, land on it, explore it, return safely. Now it was time to focus on other priorities. The space shuttle program was beginning. Skylab needed attention. There were experiments to run in low Earth orbit, partnerships with the Soviets to develop, practical applications of space technology to pursue. Missions 18, 19 and 20 were officially cancelled. The public accepted this explanation. Why wouldn't they? The excitement of the moon landings had faded. Television ratings for the later Apollo missions had dropped dramatically. People were more concerned about the economy, the energy crisis, Watergate. Landing on the moon was old news, yesterday's achievement. Time to move forward. But that wasn't the truth. Apollo 18 was genuinely cancelled, scrapped for parts. Apollo 19 was similarly abandoned. But Apollo 20 launched on August 7th, 1976, from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, not Kennedy Space Center in Florida. There was no press coverage, no public announcement, no countdown broadcast on television, just a Saturn V rocket, one of the last ever built, sitting on a launch pad that had been constructed specifically for classified military missions, carrying 3 people into space on a flight that officially never happened. The crew was handpicked from a pool of astronauts who'd never flown before, people whose names wouldn't be recognized, whose absence wouldn't be noticed. Colonel Richard Aldrich was the commander, a test pilot with over 5,000 hours in experimental aircraft, someone who'd flown things that officially didn't exist to altitudes that were classified. He was 41, unmarried, no children, no close family. Perfect for a mission that might not bring anyone home. Captain David Pierce was the lunar module pilot, 38 years old, backup crew for Apollo 16, one of the most technically proficient operators in the program. He could land the lunar module in conditions that would panic other pilots. He'd spent hundreds of hours in simulators practicing emergency procedures, system failures, worst-case scenarios. If something went wrong in Tsiolkovsky crater, Pierce was the man who might find a way out. Dr. Helen Cortez was the mission scientist, 35 years old, with doctorates in astrobiology and medicine. She was one of the few women in NASA's astronaut corps, recruited during a brief period when the agency was trying to diversify. She was brilliant, focused, and she'd spent years studying the possibility of life beyond Earth, examining meteorites for organic compounds, analyzing data from Mars probes, developing protocols for detecting and studying extraterrestrial biology. If there was anything alive in those structures, anything biological, anything that could be understood through the lens of science, Cortez would find it. Their mission was simple and terrifying. Land in Tsiolkovsky crater, approach the structures, enter if possible, document everything, collect samples, determine origin if feasible, return with answers. Time on the lunar surface, 72 hours maximum. After that, they'd run out of consumables and would have to leave regardless of what they'd found. I wasn't at mission control for this launch. I'd been reassigned months earlier, moved to a different program, officially sidelined with a promotion that was really a demotion. But I had friends throughout NASA, people who owed me favors, technicians and engineers and communications officers who'd worked with me for years. They fed me information, fragments of mission logs, pieces of transmissions recorded on backup systems, photographs taken by cameras that weren't supposed to be running, enough to reconstruct what happened, piece by piece, over the years that followed. The launch was successful, flawless execution. The Saturn V performed perfectly, carrying the command module and lunar module into Earth orbit, then firing again to send them towards the moon. The 3-day journey was uneventful, filled with systems, checks and course corrections, and the crew's growing anticipation of what they'd find. They passed behind the moon for the first time on August 10th, fired the service module engine to establish lunar orbit, and spent the next 2 days circling, photographing, planning their approach. On August 17th, 1976, at 8:47 in the morning, Houston time, the lunar module separated from the command module. Aldrich and Pierce were in the lunar module. Cortez remained in the command module to maintain orbit and serve as their communication relay to Earth. The descent took 45 minutes. A carefully controlled fall through vacuum, adjusting trajectory with bursts from the descent engine, reading altitude from radar pings against the crater floor. Aldridge's voice came through clearly, professionally calm, despite what must have been enormous tension. "Houston, we have visual on the landing site. Structures confirmed. Multiple entrances visible along the northeastern crater wall. Proceeding with final approach. Altitude 3,000 feet. Descent rate 10 feet per second. All systems nominal." The landing was perfect. Gentle touchdown, no bounce, both landing legs firmly planted on regolith that proved to be more solid than expected. "Houston, Eagle has landed. Scratch that. Challenger has landed." Slight laugh, acknowledging the wrong call sign. "Successful landing, 047 hours mission, elapsed time. Distance to primary target structure, 43 meters. We're looking at it right now through the window. Houston, it's exactly what we thought. This is artificial, no question." They waited 2 hours before attempting the first extravehicular activity, standard procedure to let systems stabilize and give the crew time to rest after the stress of landing. But I doubt either Aldrich or Pierce rested. They spent those 2 hours staring through the triangular windows of the lunar module at the structure 43 meters away, watching it, studying it, preparing themselves for what they were about to do. The first EVA began at 11:23 a.m. Houston time. Aldrich emerged first, climbing down the ladder, stepping onto the lunar surface with the now famous words, "Mankind returns to the moon." Pierce followed 30 seconds later. They stood together at the base of the lunar module, their shadows stretching across grey regolith, and looked at what they'd come to investigate. The entrance was carved into the crater wall approximately 50 feet above the floor level, accessed by a slope that had been graded to allow for easier climbing. The entrance itself was a perfect rectangle, 15 feet high, 9 feet wide, with edges that were geometrically precise. The surface appeared smooth, almost polished. Around the entrance, the rock face showed signs of deliberate modification. Tool marks, perhaps, or something else that had shaped solid stone with extraordinary precision. They approached slowly, checking instruments, photographing every step. Pierce's voice narrated their observations, professional and detailed despite the extraordinary nature of what they were seeing. Distance to entrance 30 meters. Surface composition appears consistent with standard lunar regolith. Crushed rock and fine dust. No unusual features. Slope gradient, approximately 15 degrees. Manageable for ascent. Approaching the structured area now, 20 meters. "Houston, we're detecting something unusual on instruments." There was a pause. Mission Control responded, "Define unusual, Challenger." Temperature readings are increasing, gradual but consistent. At 30 meters distance, ambient temperature was minus 180 Fahrenheit. Normal for this location in shadow. At 20 meters, minus 150. At 10 meters, we're reading minus 90. "Houston, this doesn't make sense. There's no solar heating here. This is coming from inside the structure." They reached the entrance and stopped, standing at the threshold, their helmet lights illuminating the interior. What they saw violated every understanding of lunar conditions, of vacuum, of the moon's geological history. There was atmosphere inside. Detectable, measurable atmosphere. Pierce's voice carried an edge of disbelief that made everyone in Houston stop breathing. "Houston, we're reading breathable air. Instruments show oxygen-nitrogen mix, approximately 21% the oxygen, 78% nitrogen. Trace gases consistent with Earth's atmosphere. Temperature inside the entrance chamber is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Pressure reading 0.9 atmospheres. This is not natural. This cannot be natural. Someone sealed this environment. Someone is maintaining it." The response from Houston was silence for nearly 30 seconds. Then, carefully, deliberately, copy that challenger. Proceed with caution, full documentation. Do not proceed beyond the entrance chamber without explicit authorization. They stepped inside, crossing from vacuum into breathable air, from -90 degrees to room temperature, from the moon, as we understood it, to something completely different. The entrance chamber was approximately 20 feet deep, 15 feet wide, carved from solid rock, but with surfaces that didn't look carved. They looked formed, shaped, almost grown. The walls absorbed light from their helmet lamps instead of reflecting it, creating an odd visual effect where shadows seemed deeper than they should be, where depth became difficult to judge. At the back of the entrance chamber, a corridor extended into darkness, straight, level, heading deeper into the crater wall and downward, descending at a gentle angle into the moon itself. Aldrich's voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. Houston, we're at the entrance to a corridor, dimensions approximately 8 feet wide, 10 feet high, extends beyond our light range, requesting permission to proceed. Another long pause from Houston. Then, permission granted. Proceed slowly. Maintain constant communication. They walked into that corridor, and for the next 6 hours they documented what they found. Their helmet cameras captured everything. The mission logs preserve their observations. I've studied them for decades, analysing every word, every image, trying to understand what they experienced. The corridor extended 300 meters into the crater wall before opening into a larger space. Along the way they passed side passages, smaller openings leading to rooms or chambers, each one seemingly designed for a specific purpose. The surfaces remained consistently smooth, almost organic in appearance, maintaining that light-absorbing quality that made photography difficult. The temperature stayed constant at 68 degrees. The atmosphere remained breathable, though neither astronaut removed their helmets, following protocol for unknown environments. But their instruments confirmed it repeatedly. This air was safe, hospitable, prepared for human life. 300 meters in, the corridor opened into what could only be described as living quarters, a large central space, approximately 40 feet across, with smaller rooms branching off in a radial pattern. Aldrich and Pierce entered cautiously, sweeping their lights across walls that now reflected more normally, showing details they'd been unable to see in the corridors. The rooms contained furniture, beds, 6.5 feet long, with frames that appeared to be made from some kind of metal alloy, dark grey and slightly warm to the touch. Tables at hip height for someone around 5'9", chairs with backs curved to support human posture, storage containers built into the walls, everything sized for human proportions, designed for human use. Pierce's voice carried wonder and unease in equal measure. Houston, we're looking at living spaces, quarters designed for human occupation. The scale is right. The ergonomics are right. Everything here was built for people like us. They explored systematically, documenting each room. One contained what appeared to be a bathroom with fixtures that suggested plumbing, though no water was present. Another held storage units with sealed containers. Aldrich opened one carefully, his gloved hands working the latch mechanism that operated smoothly despite presumably sitting unused for however long this place had existed. Inside the container were articles of clothing, military uniforms, or what looked like military uniforms. The fabric was advanced, unlike anything used in 1976, with a texture that seemed to shift between matte and glossy, depending on the angle of light. The colour was dark blue, almost black. There were insignia patches, but the symbols didn't match any branch of service Aldrich recognised. An eagle, yes, but stylised differently. Stars arranged in a pattern that wasn't quite the American flag. Text underneath, in English, Lunar Defense Corps. Aldrich's log entry, recorded later that evening, after they'd returned to the lunar module, carries a tremor that is impossible to miss. Found clothing in sealed containers, military uniforms, American or American-derived. The insignia is wrong. I don't recognize the branch designation. The styling is advanced, futuristic. Materials are unfamiliar but consistent with textile manufacturing, just far beyond current capabilities. It's like looking at a uniform that won't be designed for another 50 years. Or 100. We collected samples for analysis. Dr. Cortez, listening from orbit, asked the obvious question. Could these be props? Some kind of elaborate hoax? Aldrich's response was immediate. No, this is real. The scale is too large. The effort required would be impossible. You can't fake this. Someone built this place, furnished it, prepared it for human occupation, and they did it with technology we don't have. They pressed deeper, past the living quarters through another corridor that descended at a steeper angle. The air remained breathable, the temperature stable. Their consumables were depleting, oxygen tanks slowly emptying, but they pushed forward, driven by the need to understand, to find the center of this mystery. Half a mile from the entrance, the corridor opened into a chamber that dwarfed everything they'd seen before. Aldrich estimated it was large enough to hold a commercial passenger jet. The ceiling arched overhead, disappearing into darkness above the range of their lights. The floor was smooth, level, unmarked, and suspended in the exact geometric center of the chamber, connected to nothing visible, was a sphere. 3 meters in diameter, dark blue, almost black, with a surface that seemed to swallow light. But beneath that surface, visible when you looked directly at it, light moved. Currents of luminescence flowing in patterns that suggested enormous complexity, shifting and changing, pulsing with a rhythm that felt almost biological. Once every 3 seconds, the light would intensify slightly, then dim, then intensify again, like a heartbeat. Pierce stopped at the chamber entrance, his breathing audible in the helmet microphone. Houston, we've reached what appears to be a central chamber. There's a sphere here, suspended. No visible support. It's active, emitting light. Some kind of power source maybe, or a computer, or something we don't have words for. Dr. Cortez's voice came from orbit, tense with excitement. Can you approach it? Can you take readings? We're going to try, Aldrich responded. They walked slowly across the open floor, towards the sphere. Their footsteps made no sound in the thin atmosphere. The light from their helmets seemed to dim as they approached, absorbed by the sphere's dark surface. When they were 10 feet away, something changed. The sphere pulsed brighter than before. The chamber walls illuminated, not with reflected light, but as if they were generating light from within. And information began appearing on those walls. Images, text, diagrams, scrolling continuously, covering every surface, a data display of incomprehensible scale. Pierce stopped moving. Houston, the sphere is responding to our presence. The walls are lit up. We're seeing star charts, planetary diagrams, what looks like Earth's solar system rendered in detail. There's text, English, mixed with symbols we don't recognize. Mathematical notation maybe. And dates, lots of dates. Dr. Cortez, from orbit. What dates? What time periods? That's the problem, Aldrich said quietly. These dates are in the future, years from now, decades. We're seeing timelines that haven't happened yet. The displays continued for several minutes while the 2 astronauts stood there, trying to capture it on their helmet cameras, trying to understand what they were witnessing. Technical schematics for devices that didn't exist, architectural plans for structures that hadn't been built, historical records of events that hadn't occurred. All of it presented matter-of-factly, as if it were established fact rather than impossible prediction. Then the displays changed. The walls showed a single image, stable, no longer scrolling. Earth. But not Earth as they knew it. The continents were right. The oceans were right. But the coastlines were different. Seas had risen. Entire regions that should be land were underwater. And above the planet, visible in orbit, were structures. Massive constructions, space stations or colonies, connected by what looked like tethers or transit systems. A human civilization that had expanded into space on a scale that seemed impossible. Beneath the image, text appeared. A single date, November 2083. Pierce's voice was barely a whisper. "Houston, are you seeing this? Is this a prediction? A warning? What are we looking at?" The response from Houston was long in coming. "Finally, we're seeing it, Challenger. Continue documentation. Proceed deeper if possible." Adjacent to the central chamber, they found another space. Smaller, more intimate. The walls here were covered with plaques. Metal plates, each one approximately 2 feet by 1 foot, arranged in precise rows that covered every available surface. Aldrich approached the nearest wall and read what was engraved there. Names, thousands of names, each one accompanied by a date and a designation. The format was consistent. Name, birth year, arrival date, role or specialty. The first entry on the wall read, Morrison Elizabeth, born 2001, arrived June 2027, Chief Engineer, Environmental Systems. Pierce moved along the wall, reading entries aloud. Chen David, born 1998, arrived June 2027, Medical Officer Trauma. Kowalski Anna, born 2003, arrived July 2027, Agricultural Specialist. Hydroponics, these are colony manifests, crew rosters for a settlement, but the dates are all in the future, Aldrich finished. This isn't historical, this is planning or memory, or something we don't have a framework for understanding. They spent an hour in that chamber, photographing the walls, recording as many names as possible. The dates ranged from 2027 through the late 2040s. Thousands of people, all with arrival dates that were decades in the future, all with roles that suggested a functioning colony, an established settlement. Engineers and doctors and technicians and farmers and teachers. Families based on shared surnames and sequential arrival dates. Children listed with their parents, their arrival dates matching. This wasn't a military installation. This wasn't a research outpost. This was a refuge, a home, a place where humans would live and work and raise families carved into the moon's surface, maintained by technology that defied explanation, waiting for people who hadn't been born yet. Dr. Cortez's voice broke the silence. "Richard, David, you need to return to the lunar module. Your oxygen is at 30%. You've been in there for 6 hours. You need to come back now." Aldrich acknowledged, but before they left he recorded one final log entry standing in front of those walls of names. "Houston, this is Commander Aldrich. We found what appears to be a colony manifest. Records of thousands of people scheduled to arrive here between 2027 and 2049. This facility isn't ancient. It's not a ruin. It's waiting. It's prepared for human habitation, and according to these records, that habitation begins in 51 years. We're looking at documentation of future colonization. This city is waiting for people who haven't come here yet, but will." They returned to the lunar module, moving quickly now, oxygen running low, both of them silent with the weight of what they'd discovered. They spent the next 66 hours conducting additional EVAs, exploring other entrances along the crater wall, finding more living quarters, more equipment storage, more chambers filled with technology they couldn't identify. Each exploration added more questions without providing answers. On their final EVA, Pierce discovered something that changed everything. In a chamber near the main entrance, a room they'd passed before but hadn't fully explored, there was a display screen. Inactive when they'd first entered, but now illuminated, showing a single message in English. "Welcome, pioneers. You are early. The door will remain open. Proceed to assigned quarters when timeline aligns. Instructions will be provided. Do not fear. We are you. You are us. Time is a circle, and this is the center." Pierce read it 3 times, his voice shaking. "Houston, there's a message here. In English. Current English, not archaic. It's addressing us directly. It's acknowledging that we arrived ahead of schedule. It's talking to our future selves," Dr. Cortez said from orbit. "Or it's talking to us as if we're our future selves. Or time doesn't work the way we think it does." They collected samples, fragments of the walls, pieces of furniture, sections of fabric from those uniforms. Everything carefully sealed in collection bags, documented, catalogued. When their consumables reached critical levels, they reluctantly returned to the lunar module for the final time. The ascent from the lunar surface went smoothly. Rendezvous with the command module was perfect. They transferred the samples, backed up all their recordings, and prepared for the long journey home. The return flight took 3 days. They splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on August the 22nd, 1976, at 2:37 p.m. local time. A Navy recovery ship was waiting, but it wasn't the usual carrier with thousands of personnel and press coverage. It was a destroyer, minimal crew, no reporters, no cameras, except official Navy documentation. The crew was extracted from the capsule, given brief medical examinations on deck, then immediately transferred by helicopter to a classified military facility somewhere in Nevada. They weren't allowed to speak to anyone. Their families were told they'd be debriefed and released within a week. That was a lie. For 3 weeks, they underwent intensive interrogation. Not debriefing, interrogation. They were separated, questioned individually for hours each day. The same questions repeated in different forms, looking for inconsistencies, testing their stories, trying to determine if what they reported was real or some kind of shared delusion brought on by the stress of the mission. The samples were seized immediately. The recordings were copied and classified at levels that required special authorization even to acknowledge existed. The photographs were analyzed, then buried. Every shred of evidence from Apollo 20 was locked away, and the 3 people who'd experienced it firsthand were told in no uncertain terms that they would never speak of it. 3 weeks after splashdown, Colonel Richard Aldrich was released from the facility and told to report to Edwards Air Force Base for reassignment. He never arrived. The official report stated he was killed in a training accident involving an experimental aircraft. No body was recovered. No witnesses came forward. The accident investigation was classified. 6 weeks after the mission, Captain David Pierce was found dead in his car at the bottom of a ravine outside Flagstaff, Arizona. Single vehicle accident on a straight road in clear weather. The car had apparently left the road at high speed, rolled multiple times, and come to rest upside down. Pierce was killed instantly, the coroner reported. The investigation found no mechanical failure, no evidence of impairment, no explanation for why an experienced driver would lose control under perfect conditions. The case was closed within 2 weeks. 4 months after Apollo 20, Dr. Helen Cortez vanished. She'd been placed under house arrest, essentially, confined to her apartment in Houston, with security personnel watching her continuously. One evening in December, the guards went to check on her and found the apartment empty. Her belongings were there. Her car was in the garage. The windows were locked from the inside. The doors were sealed. She had simply ceased to exist. No trace was ever found. The official story was that she'd suffered a mental breakdown from the stress of the mission and was receiving treatment at an undisclosed private facility. That treatment apparently continues to this day, 48 years later. I tried to investigate what happened to them. Quietly, carefully, using contacts and favors and connections I'd built over decades. But every inquiry hit walls. Classified. Need to know. National security. Access denied. And people started dying. Not the astronauts. They were already gone. But the support personnel. Engineers who'd built components for Apollo 20. Technicians who'd processed the film. Medical staff who'd examined the crew. Communications officers who'd monitored the transmissions. Between 1976 and 1984, 18 people connected to the Apollo 20 mission died under circumstances that were questionable at best, suspicious at worst. Car accidents, home fires, sudden illnesses. One man fell from his apartment balcony in the middle of the night. Another was mugged and killed in a supposedly safe neighborhood. A woman died from an apparent overdose of sleeping pills despite having no history of depression or substance abuse. The message was clear. Apollo 20 never happened. The structures in Tsiolkovsky don't exist. Anyone who suggests otherwise will disappear. In 1983, my phone rang at 3 a.m. I was 60 years old, semi-retired, working as a consultant on the early space shuttle missions. I picked up expecting an emergency from the office, some technical problem that needed immediate attention. A man's voice, calm and emotionless, spoke without introduction. Dr. Walsh, the Apollo program ended with Apollo 17. There was no Mission 18, no Mission 19, no Mission 20. You will confirm this fact if asked. You will never suggest otherwise. These events did not occur. Your family lives at 2847 Oak Ridge Drive. Your daughter teaches at Lincoln Elementary. Your grandson attends daycare on Maple Street. We know where they are. Always. Acknowledge your understanding. I acknowledged. What else could I do? I stopped investigating. I buried my copies of the evidence deeper, scattered them across safe deposit boxes in different states under different names. I kept my head down, did my work, lived my life, and tried to pretend I didn't carry this weight. But I couldn't stop thinking about what those astronauts found, about what it meant, about why someone would go to such extraordinary lengths to hide it. And then, slowly, things started changing. In 2009, NASA launched the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, a sophisticated probe designed to map the moon's surface in unprecedented detail. The mission's stated goals were to identify potential landing sites for future exploration, study the lunar radiation environment, and search for water ice in permanently shadowed craters near the poles. The orbiter carried powerful cameras capable of resolving features as small as 3 feet across, good enough to photograph the old Apollo landing sites and capture images of the hardware we'd left behind 50 years earlier. It also photographed Tsiolkovsky crater. High resolution, multiple passes, different lighting conditions. Those images were made publicly available through NASA's database. Most people looking at them saw exactly what they expected to see. A large impact crater 75 miles wide, with a prominent central peak and a dark, lava-flooded floor. Standard lunar geology. But Dr. Raymond Foster saw something else. Foster is an independent astrophysicist with no NASA affiliation, which probably saved his life. He runs a small research facility in Colorado, funded by private grants and his own modest inheritance. He specializes in thermal mapping of planetary bodies, analyzing heat signatures to understand geological activity, internal composition, and potential resource deposits. He's published extensively on Mars, Venus, Mercury, even asteroids. And in 2011, he decided to analyze Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter data for the far side of the moon. I met with Dr. Foster last year at his facility outside Boulder. He's 73, thin and intense, with the kind of focused energy that comes from spending decades pursuing answers to questions nobody else is asking. He led me into his office, a cluttered space filled with computer monitors and star charts and stacks of scientific papers, and pulled up his analysis on the largest screen. "Ted, look at this," he said, his finger tracing features on a thermal map of Tsiolkovsky crater. "The moon has no atmosphere, minimal geological activity. Surface temperatures are determined almost entirely by solar heating. During the lunar day, temperatures in direct sunlight can reach 250 degrees Fahrenheit. During the lunar night, they drop to minus 250 in permanently shadowed areas. It's extreme, but it's predictable." He zoomed in on the crater wall, except here. These locations show consistent heat signatures that don't correlate with solar exposure. During the lunar night, when this entire region should be at minus 250 degrees, these spots maintain temperatures between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not residual solar heating. That's not radioactive decay. That's active, continuous heat generation from internal sources. I asked him what could cause that. He turned to look at me directly. "Ted, I've spent 40 years studying planetary thermodynamics. I know every natural process that generates heat. Radioactive decay, tidal friction, chemical reactions, impact heating. None of them explain this. The signatures are too localized, too consistent, too strong. And when I overlay the thermal map with optical images, guess what those heat sources correspond to?" He pulled up another image. The heat signatures align perfectly with the geometric structures carved into the crater wall. The same structures Schmidt had photographed. The same structures the Apollo 20 crew had entered. "Something inside Tsiolkovsky is powered on," Foster said quietly. "Has been for at least as long as we've been measuring, probably much longer. Environmental control systems maybe, life support, artificial heating, maintaining habitable temperatures in those structures, and it's been running continuously, waiting, for God knows how long." I asked him if he published this analysis. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I tried, submitted to every major journal. All rejected without review. I presented at conferences, lost my speaking slot at 3 different events for technical reasons. I applied for NASA funding to do more detailed analysis. Denied. I reached out to colleagues, people I've worked with for decades. They stopped returning my calls. The message was clear. Drop this, pretend you didn't see it, move on." "But you didn't," I said. "No, because this is real. This is important, and someone needs to know about it." Around the same time Foster was making his discoveries, China was advancing its lunar exploration program. In 2018, they launched the Queqiao relay satellite to the Earth-Moon L2 Lagrange point, a gravitationally stable location about 40,000 miles beyond the moon. This satellite enabled something that had never been possible before: continuous communication with spacecraft on the lunar far side. On January 3rd, 2019, China's Chang'e 4 lander touched down in Von Karman crater, a massive impact basin on the far side. It was a historic achievement, the first soft landing on the hemisphere we never see from Earth. The mission deployed the U-22 rover, which continues to operate today, making it the longest-lived lunar rover in history. The scientific returns have been extraordinary. Detailed analysis of farside geology, subsurface composition, radiation environment. But there was something else, something that wasn't widely publicized. I have a source inside the Chinese space program, someone I can't identify, someone who risks their life by communicating with me. They sent me documents, technical reports, communication logs. I can't verify their authenticity completely, but the technical details are consistent with legitimate space agency operations, and my source has been reliable on other matters. According to these documents, on January 7th, 2019, 4 days after landing, the Queqiao relay satellite detected unusual electromagnetic signals originating from a location approximately 700 kilometers northeast of the Chang'e 4 landing site. The signals showed regular modulation patterns at frequencies not associated with any known natural phenomenon. The pattern repeated every 47 minutes, always the same duration, always the same frequency, suggesting artificial origin. The source of the signals: Tsiolkovsky crater. The Chinese Space Agency classified the information immediately and ordered the Chang'e 4 mission team not to investigate further. Focus on the primary mission objectives. Ignore the anomaly. Don't deviate from the approved plan. But they couldn't ignore it completely. In May 2024, China launched Chang'e 6, a sample return mission to the lunar far side. The official target was Apollo Basin, a region inside the South Pole Aitken impact structure. The landing was successful, samples were collected, and on June 25, 2024, the return capsule landed in Inner Mongolia, carrying nearly 2 kilograms of far-side material. A tremendous achievement. The first samples ever returned from that hemisphere. What wasn't publicly reported were the anomalies during the landing approach. Amateur radio enthusiasts who monitor space missions captured telemetry data showing an unexpected course correction. The Chang'e 6 lander deviated from its planned trajectory, adjusting its descent path to carry it several kilometers north of the intended landing site toward the direction of Tsiolkovsky crater. Mission Control transmitted urgent commands ordering the spacecraft back to the original approach vector. The lander complied, but for approximately 8 minutes it was off course, traveling towards something it wasn't supposed to investigate. During those 8 minutes, the lander's cameras captured footage. I've seen 37 seconds of it, leaked through channels I can't disclose. The quality is poor, compressed multiple times, transmitted through networks that weren't designed for video. But it's unmistakable. Distant view of a crater wall. Geometric structures carved into the rock face. Multiple entrances visible. Dark rectangles against grey stone. And something else. Movement. Brief, barely visible. But there. Something passed across one of those entrances. Something that reflected sunlight. Something that might have been metallic. The footage ends abruptly. The lander returned to its approved course. The samples were collected without further incident. But for 8 minutes, Chinese cameras were pointed at Tsiolkovsky, and they saw what has been hidden for decades. Every space agency that looks at the far side sees the same thing, and none of them are talking about it. Not publicly, but privately, quietly, they're all making preparations. There's something else that's been happening, something that ordinary people have been witnessing for years, without understanding its significance. In 2015, an amateur astronomer in Arizona named Matthew Kowalski noticed something unusual while photographing the moon. Matthew isn't a professional scientist, he's a retired software engineer who built an observatory in his backyard. Because he's loved astronomy since childhood. He has high-quality equipment, a 14-inch reflector telescope with a CCD camera, and he's been taking detailed images of the moon almost every clear night for 30 years. He keeps meticulous records: date, time, seeing conditions, equipment settings, target areas. His archive contains tens of thousands of lunar images, documenting the moon's surface across 3 decades of observation. And in September 2015, reviewing images from a particular night, he noticed something that shouldn't be there. Lights on the far side, small, discrete points of illumination just past the visible terminator in the region that should be completely dark. He thought it was an artifact at first, some kind of reflection in his optical train, or a cosmic ray hit on his CCD sensor. But the lights appeared in multiple frames, in consistent locations, and they weren't present in images from previous nights. He started watching more carefully, recording more frequently, paying special attention to those specific locations. And he discovered a pattern. The lights appeared on July 20th every year, exactly on that date. Small clusters of illumination in the same locations on the far side, visible for approximately 3 hours, then fading. They also appeared on December 24th every year, same pattern, and on December 11th. Same location, same duration. Matthew didn't understand the significance until I explained it to him. July 20th, 1969. Apollo 11's landing. December 24th, 1968. Apollo 8's first orbit. December 11th, 1972. Apollo 17's touchdown. Someone on the moon was marking the anniversaries of human achievement, celebrating them, remembering them. I drove to Arizona to meet Matthew last year. He lives in a small house outside Flagstaff, with his observatory dome rising from the backyard like a strange growth. He's 68, soft-spoken, earnest. He showed me his archive, pulling up images on his computer, walking me through years of observations. I thought I was seeing things at first, he admitted. I'm just an amateur. I figured professional astronomers would have noticed this if it was real, but then I checked with other observers, posted some images on astronomy forums, and nobody else was seeing it. Some people thought I was joking. Others got angry, accused me of faking the images. I almost stopped talking about it. What changed your mind? I asked. He pulled up a video file dated November 2023. This. I upgraded my equipment, got a better camera, improved tracking, and I captured something that proves these lights aren't just reflections or artifacts. He played the video. Lunar surface, the Terminator edge, darkness beyond. Small points of light appeared in the shadowed region, faint but visible. They stayed stationary for several seconds. Then they moved. Not randomly, deliberately. Following paths, travelling along lines, creating patterns against the dark surface. The video played for 90 seconds, showing the lights moving in coordinated sequences. Matthew stopped the video and pulled up an enhanced version. He'd processed it, cleaned up the noise, improved the contrast. The paths the lights had followed became clear. They weren't random, they spelled words. W-E-L-C-O-M-E. That's when I knew I wasn't crazy, Matthew said quietly. Whatever these lights are, whoever is controlling them, they're sending messages. They want to be seen. I had Dr. Foster analyze Matthew's footage. He confirmed it was genuine, not digitally manipulated, showing real light sources on the lunar surface. He also plotted the locations where those lights appeared. They corresponded exactly to the structures in Tsiolkovsky crater, the same structures showing heat signatures, the same structures the Apollo 20 crew explored. Someone is in there, someone is active, and they're trying to communicate. In September 2023, Matthew captured another video. The lights spelled different words this time. C-O-M-E-H-O-M-E. In February 2024, they spelled S-O-O-N. In July 2024, on the anniversary of Apollo 11, the lights created the most complex message yet. A date, 2026, 2 years from now. I filed inquiries with NASA, formal requests for comment. I reached out to former colleagues, people I'd worked with for decades, people who owed me favours. I sent detailed reports with Matthew's images, Foster's thermal analysis, my own documentation of Apollo 20. Not one response, complete silence. They know I know, and they're betting I'll die before I can do anything that matters. But then, in November 2019, I received a package that changed everything. Plain cardboard box, standard postal delivery, addressed to me with no return address. Inside, wrapped in bubble wrap, was a single 8x10 photograph. Modern print, high resolution, glossy finish, professional quality. The photograph showed the lunar surface, grey regolith, harsh shadows, the distinctive appearance of airless environment. In the background, carved into a crater wall, was an entrance, large, rectangular, precisely geometric. The entrance to the Tsiolkovsky structures exactly as described in the Apollo 20 mission logs. But the door was open, fully open. Light spilled from the interior, warm and golden, completely unlike the harsh white sunlight that illuminates the lunar surface. And standing in that doorway silhouetted against the light was a human figure. They wore a pressure suit, not Apollo-era equipment. The design was modern, streamlined, with a hard upper torso and flexible lower sections. The helmet was clear, showing a face in shadow. Life support systems were integrated into the torso unit, compact and efficient. This was advanced technology, decades beyond what we used in the 1970s. The suit had patches on both shoulders. The left shoulder carried an American flag. The right shoulder had an emblem I didn't recognize, a stylized moon with Earth visible above it, surrounded by text. I used a magnifying glass to read the text. Lunar Colonial Initiative, established 2031. Below that, in smaller letters, First Settlement, Tsiolkovsky Station. I had the photograph analysed by 3 different forensic experts, paying them privately, asking them to sign confidentiality agreements. All 3 reached the same conclusion. The image showed no signs of digital manipulation. The lighting was consistent with lunar conditions. The shadows were correct. The surface texture matched authentic lunar regolith. The photograph appeared to be genuine, a real image taken on the lunar surface, showing a person in a modern pressure suit standing in the entrance to Tsiolkovsky crater. But that was impossible. No human has walked on the moon since December 1972. There is no lunar colonial initiative. The year 2031 hasn't happened yet. This photograph shouldn't exist. Unless time doesn't work the way we think it does. Unless our descendants found a way to reach back, to send evidence to prove they're waiting. Unless the future is already written, and we're just living through the prelude. I kept that photograph in a safe deposit box for 5 years. I showed it to a few trusted people. I had it analysed and reanalyzed. I tried to understand what it meant, where it came from, who sent it to me. Then, 6 months ago, in December 2024, I received another package. This one contained a device I'd never seen before, roughly the size of a tablet computer, maybe 12 inches by 8 inches, surprisingly thin. The casing was made from a material I couldn't identify, dark grey with a subtle texture, warm to the touch. There were no visible seams, no screws, no manufacturer markings, no brand names or model numbers. It was completely anonymous. On one surface was a small circular button. I pressed it. The device powered on instantly, no boot sequence, no loading screen. The display lit up with perfect clarity, better resolution than any screen I'd ever seen. A single icon appeared, a video file. I touched it. The video began without preamble. Lunar surface, Tsiolkovsky crater viewed from ground level. The sun was at a low angle, creating long shadows. The entrance structures were fully visible, and they were illuminated from within. Warm light poured from multiple openings, at least a dozen of them, spilling golden radiance across grey regolith. The perspective moved, the camera advancing toward the nearest entrance. The quality was extraordinary, stabilized, perfectly exposed, professional cinematography. As the camera approached the entrance, figures became visible. People. Walking out of the illuminated doorway, moving with the characteristic bouncing gait of lunar gravity, but their movements were practiced, comfortable, natural. They weren't wearing pressure suits. They wore simple clothing, coveralls mostly, in various colours, grey, blue, dark green. Some had jackets. The camera moved closer, and faces became visible. Men, women, different ages, different ethnicities. They were talking to each other, though the video had no audio. They were gesturing, laughing, living, on the moon, breathing air that shouldn't exist in an environment that should kill them instantly. The perspective shifted, following a woman in grey coveralls as she walked back through the entrance. The camera followed her inside. Through the entrance chamber I recognised from the Apollo 20 mission logs down the corridor with its light-absorbing walls into the living quarters. But now those quarters were occupied, furnished, lived in. The beds had bedding. The tables held personal items, tablets and books and cups. The walls displayed photographs, children's drawings, personal decorations. This wasn't a sterile facility. This was a home. The camera continued deeper, showing more spaces. Common areas where people gathered, sitting on couches, watching large displays, showing Earth hanging in space. Cafeterias where families ate together, children sitting with parents, conversation flowing. Laboratories filled with equipment I didn't recognize, staffed by people in white lab coats working intently on projects I couldn't identify. Hydroponics gardens, vast spaces filled with growing plants under banks of purple-tinged lights. Rows and rows of vegetables, grains, fruit trees. People working among the plants, harvesting, tending, maintaining. A complete agricultural system underground on the moon, producing food for a population I couldn't estimate but that clearly numbered in the hundreds at minimum. Recreational spaces where children played, floating in the low gravity, supervised by adults who watched with patient attention. Educational areas where young people sat in classes, learning from instructors, taking notes on tablets. Medical facilities with examination rooms and diagnostic equipment that looked far more advanced than anything I'd seen on Earth. This wasn't an outpost. This wasn't a temporary station. This was a colony, a settlement, a functioning human community living beneath the lunar surface, thriving in an environment that should be lethal, sustained by technology that seemed impossible. The video timestamp was burned into the corner of every frame. August 17th, 2031. 7 years from now. Near the end of the video, the camera moved through another corridor and entered the chamber I remembered from the mission logs. The memorial wall. But now I could see it clearly, fully lit, and the scale was overwhelming. The walls were covered with names, floor to ceiling, extending around the entire circumference of the chamber. Tens of thousands of names, maybe hundreds of thousands, each one with a date beside it. The camera moved slowly along the wall, showing names in sequence. I recognized some of them, contemporary scientists, engineers I knew were working at NASA and SpaceX and Blue Origin right now, astronauts currently in training, researchers I'd read about in journals, and then, about halfway up one wall, the camera stopped and zoomed in on a specific name. Theodore Walsh, born 1943, died 2026. Below my name, an inscription. Original witness, first warning, archive preservation. My heart stopped. Literally stopped for several beats before resuming at double speed. This wasn't a prediction. This wasn't speculation, this was history. My history written before it happened. In 2 years, I would be dead. And somehow in the decades that followed, my name would be engraved on a memorial wall on the moon because I'd kept the evidence, preserved the truth, and finally found the courage to share it. The camera pulled back, and a woman stepped into frame. She looked about 30, athletic build, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore grey coveralls with that same patch on the shoulder. Lunar Colonial Initiative. Her face was calm, confident, compassionate. She looked directly into the camera, directly at me, across 7 years and 240,000 miles of space, and spoke. The video had no audio, but text appeared at the bottom of the screen, subtitles translating her words. Dr. Walsh, thank you. Thank you for keeping the secret when you had to. Thank you for protecting the evidence when others tried to destroy it. Thank you for having the courage to finally speak the truth. even knowing the cost. We are here because of people like you. People who preserved the knowledge. People who refused to let it be buried forever. People who understood that some truths are more important than individual safety. She paused, and the text continued. The door has always been open. Since before you were born, this place existed, waiting. We built it for ourselves, you built it for us. Time is a circle, and this moment, your moment, is the point where the circle closes. In 2 years, the first official mission will arrive. They'll walk through this entrance, they'll see what you saw in those mission logs. They'll understand what it means, and they'll begin the process of bringing humanity home. She gestured around her, indicating the colony, the people, the thriving settlement. This is not the end of humanity on Earth. This is insurance, a refuge if we need it, a sanctuary if the worst happens, a second chance if we fail to save our homeworld. Your descendants built this because they remembered the lessons of history. Civilizations fall, ecosystems collapse, disasters occur, and species that put all their population in one place go extinct. We refuse to accept that fate. We reach back through time, using methods I cannot explain, and you would not believe, and we built this place. For you, for us, for the children who haven't been born yet but will need somewhere safe. She stepped closer to the camera. In your time, you see the signs. Climate change accelerating, political instability spreading, resources depleting faster than they can be renewed. You wonder if humanity has a future. We are your answer. Yes, we survive, we endure, we thrive. Not because we abandoned Earth, but because we gave ourselves options. We built a home among the stars, and we've been waiting for you to be ready to join us. The text paused, the screen holding on her face. Then the final message appeared. Dr. Walsh, you won't live to see the colony in person. Your time ends in 2026, as the wall indicates. But your work, your courage, your refusal to stay silent, that will live forever. When children in this colony learn history, they'll learn your name. They'll understand that you were the one who preserved the proof when powerful people tried to bury it. You are part of this place, even if you never walk through its doors. Come home, Theodore. Your work is done. Rest knowing that everything you protected mattered. We are here, we are waiting, and soon we will welcome your grandchildren. The video ended. The screen went black. I sat there in my living room holding this impossible device and cried for the first time in 40 years. I tried to have the device analysed. I called a friend who specialises in material science, told him I had something unusual I needed examined. We arranged to meet at his lab. I put the device in a locked case and placed it in my safe overnight. The next morning the safe was open. The device was gone, no sign of forced entry. The safe's lock was intact, the device had simply vanished. But I'd made copies of the video, multiple copies stored in different locations, uploaded to encrypted cloud services, hidden in ways that would make them difficult to find, but not impossible. I've also written everything down, every detail I could remember, every piece of evidence I'd accumulated over decades. This testimony is part of that record. I'm 81 years old. According to that memorial wall, I'll be dead in 2 years. Heart failure, probably, or stroke. My health isn't good. I've lived with stress and fear and the weight of impossible knowledge for most of my adult life. I don't expect to make it much longer. But before I go, I need people to understand what's waiting for them, what's been built, what's been prepared. NASA's Artemis program is accelerating towards its goal of returning humans to the moon. Artemis had launched successfully in November 2022, testing the Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft in a mission that orbited the moon and returned to Earth. Artemis 2 is scheduled for September 2025, carrying astronauts around the moon, but not landing. Artemis 3, planned for September 2026, will be the landing mission. The first humans on the lunar surface in 54 years. The official landing site is Shackleton Crater near the South Pole, chosen because water ice has been detected there, a crucial resource for future settlement. But I've seen documents that tell a different story. Internal NASA memos, mission planning files, crew selection criteria. They've been leaked to me by people inside the program who believe the public deserves to know the truth. One memo dated March 2023 reads, Project Gateway Priority 1. Investigate Tsiolkovsky structures before international partners establish far-side presence. Timeline critical. Modified mission parameters authorized pending presidential approval. Crew training to include far-side landing scenarios. Communication relay satellite deployment accelerated. Science objectives secondary to strategic confirmation. The Artemis 3 crew selection is revealing. Commander, a test pilot with extensive experience in experimental aircraft. Pilot, a systems specialist who can diagnose and repair complex failures in real time. Mission specialist, a structural engineer with expertise in underground construction and environmental systems. These aren't the skills you need to collect rocks at the South Pole. These are the skills you need to enter an unknown facility, assess its systems, determine its safety, and report back on its habitability. They're planning to go to Tsiolkovsky. Not immediately, maybe. Not on the primary mission, but the contingency plans are in place. The training is happening. The crew knows what they might find. And they're not the only ones preparing. SpaceX has a classified NASA contract worth billions involving lunar transportation and surface operations. Blue Origin is developing cargo landers capable of delivering 20 tons to the lunar surface. Multiple nations have announced lunar programs targeting the late 2020s. China, India, Russia, Japan, the European Space Agency. Everyone is going back to the moon, and everyone is doing it urgently, racing against some unspoken deadline. That deadline, I believe, is 2031. The date when the Lunar Colonial Initiative was established, according to that pressure suit patch. The date shown in the video. The year when the colony becomes operational. When the first permanent residents arrive. When Tsiolkovsky Station transitions from waiting to inhabited. We have 7 years. 7 years to prepare, to build the transportation infrastructure, to train the personnel, to manufacture the equipment. 7 years to get ready for the moment when humanity divides itself between two worlds. But there's something else, something the woman in the video implied, but didn't state directly. Something that terrifies me, more than the impossible technology, or the time loop paradox, or the existence of the colony itself. We're not building this refuge for exploration. We're not creating a backup plan out of academic caution or scientific curiosity. We're building it because something is coming. Something that requires humanity to establish a permanent presence beyond Earth, not as an achievement, but as survival, necessity. And what did our descendants see when they looked back at our time? What future events drove them to reach across decades or centuries and construct this sanctuary? Climate apocalypse, nuclear exchange, pandemic, asteroid impact, something worse we can't even imagine. The woman said this place is insurance, a refuge if we need it. But the scale suggests it's more than that. Tens of thousands of names on that memorial wall. Hundreds of people visible in the video, implying thousands more in other sections. This isn't a research station, this is an ark. A place designed to preserve human civilization if Earth fails. And if our future selves felt it necessary to build this, what does that say about what's coming? I don't have answers. Nobody alive today does. But the moon remembers. Tsiolkovsky remembers. Those structures hold the truth, waiting for us to be ready to understand. 3 weeks from now, if that memorial wall is accurate, I'll be dead. Natural causes, the report will say. An old man whose heart finally gave out. Nobody will suspect anything. Nobody will investigate. I'll be cremated quickly, my ashes scattered, and this testimony will be all that remains of my role in this story. But I've done what I could. Preserved the evidence, documented the timeline, connected the pieces. This recording, these files, they're my legacy. My contribution to a future I won't live to see, but that I've spent my life protecting. Look up tonight. Find the moon in the sky. That familiar presence we've watched since childhood. Picture the far side, the hemisphere we never see from Earth. Imagine Tsiolkovsky crater 75 miles wide with a central peak rising 2 miles high, carved by cosmic violence 4 billion years ago. Beneath that surface, cut into solid rock maintained by technology we don't understand, there is a city, not abandoned, not ancient, growing, active, waiting. Your name might already be engraved on those walls. Your arrival date might already be recorded in those manifests. Your quarters might already be prepared. Your role in the colony already assigned. Your place in humanity's future already determined. The door is open. It's been open since before any of us were born. And in 7 years, if everything proceeds as planned, we'll walk through it together. Some of us willingly, others because we have no choice. All of us part of a cycle that closes around itself, where the future builds the past and the past enables the future, and time stops being a line and becomes something we don't have words for. Come home, the woman said. Come home to a place you've never been, but that was built for you. Come home to a refuge your descendants created, because they loved you enough to reach back through impossible time and save you from extinction. The lights continue to appear on those significant dates. July 20th, December 24th, December 11th. They spell messages now. Welcome, soon, wait, ready. In 2026, they'll spell something different, I think. They'll spell now. And humanity will step through that door, leaving footprints on ancient dust, entering corridors that shouldn't exist, finding homes that were prepared generations ago, and finally understanding the truth. We are not alone in the universe. We are not the first intelligent species. We are not the only ones to have visited the moon. We are the ones who built it all. We are the architects of our own salvation. We reached back through time to save ourselves from a future we could see coming, but couldn't prevent. Time is a circle, and Tsiolkovsky crater is the center, the point where past and future meet, where cause and effect blur, where humanity's ending becomes its beginning, and its beginning enables its ending. I won't live to see it. My time ends in 2026, according to the wall. But my grandchildren will walk through that door. They'll breathe the air our descendants created. They'll live in the rooms we built. They'll be part of something greater than any individual life, part of humanity's survival, part of the circle that can never be broken. And somewhere in that colony, in a chamber filled with names, there will be a memorial to the people who preserved the truth when powerful forces tried to bury it. My name will be there. Theodore Walsh, original witness, first warning. I made my choice. I'm speaking now, knowing the cost, accepting the consequences. The door is open. Time is running out. Come home. We're waiting.